History of America, uncovering the events leading to America's freedom in 1776. The United States of America is known throughout the world as a symbol of freedom and democracy. Every year, on the 4th of July, Americans celebrate the anniversary of their independence from Great Britain. But how did this independence come about? What events led to the creation of the United States of America in 1776? In this video we will explore the history of the American Revolution and the series of events that culminated in the signing of the Declaration of Independence. From the Boston Tea Party to the Battle of Bunker Hill, we will uncover the key moments that led to America's freedom and independence. Join us on this journey through history as we explore the road to independence and the birth of a nation. 1. The American Revolution, the spark to independence. The American Revolution, which began in 1775, was the spark that led to the United States' independence from Great Britain. The colonists' desire for independence stemmed from several factors, including taxation without representation, British interference in colonial affairs, and a desire for greater economic freedom. The colonists felt they were being unfairly taxed by the British government, which had imposed a series of taxes on goods such as sugar, tea, and paper. They believed that they should not be subject to these taxes as they had no representation in the British Parliament. The colonists also resented the British government's interference in their affairs, particularly with regards to trade and commerce. In response to these grievances, the colonists began to organize and resist British rule. They formed groups such as the Sons of Liberty and the Committees of Correspondence to coordinate their efforts and share information. Tensions between the colonists and British troops began to escalate, and in 1775, the first shots of the American Revolution were fired at Lexington and Concord. The American Revolution was a long and difficult struggle, but it ultimately led to the United States' independence from Great Britain. The events leading up to the Revolution and the subsequent War for Independence are a testament to the colonists' determination to be free and their willingness to risk everything to achieve that goal. 2. The Stamp Act of 1765. The Stamp Act of 1765 was a tax imposed by the British Parliament on every printed paper used in the American colonies. This included legal documents, newspapers, pamphlets, and even playing cards. It was an attempt to raise funds for the British Army stationed in America after the French and Indian War. The colonists were outraged and saw the tax as a violation of their rights as British citizens. They believed that only their own elected representatives had the power to tax them. This was the first time that the British Parliament had directly taxed the colonists, and it sparked a wave of protests across the colonies. The colonists formed the Stamp Act Congress and issued a Declaration of Rights and Grievances, which stated that only colonial assemblies had the right to tax the colonists. The Stamp Act was eventually repealed, but the damage was done. It set the stage for further protests and tensions between the colonists and the British government, which ultimately led to the American Revolution and the Declaration of Independence. The Stamp Act was a pivotal moment in American history and showed the colonists' determination to fight for their rights and freedoms. 3. The Boston Tea Party of 1773. The Boston Tea Party was a significant event in the lead-up to America's fight for independence in 1776. The event, which took place on December 16, 1773, was a direct response to the Tea Act passed by the British Parliament in May of that year. The Tea Act was designed to give the British East India Company a monopoly on tea sales in the American colonies, effectively undercutting American merchants who sold tea imported from other countries. In protest, a group of colonists, disguised as Native Americans, boarded 3 British ships in Boston Harbor and dumped 342 chests of tea overboard. This act of rebellion sparked outrage from Britain and led to a series of punitive measures against the colonists, including the passage of the Coercive Acts, which closed the port of Boston until the destroyed tea was paid for, and increased British military presence in the colonies. The Boston Tea Party became a rallying cry for American colonists who were tired of British taxation and control over their lives. It was a clear indication that the colonists were willing to take bold actions to assert their rights and stand up to the British government. The event would play a significant role in the lead-up to America's eventual fight for independence and remains an iconic moment in American history to this day. 4. The Coercive Acts of 1774. The Coercive Acts of 1774, also known as the Intolerable Acts, were a series of laws passed by the British Parliament in response to the Boston Tea Party. These acts were meant to punish the colonists in Massachusetts and bring them back into line with British authority. They included the Boston Port Act, which closed the port of Boston until the colonists paid for the tea they had destroyed; the Massachusetts Government Act, which increased the power of the royal governor and reduced the ability of the colonists to govern themselves; the Administration of Justice Act, which allowed British officials accused of crimes to be tried in England instead of in the colonies; and the Quartering Act, which required colonists to house and feed British soldiers. These acts were seen by the colonists as a direct attack on their rights and freedoms. They believed that the British government was trying to take away their ability to govern themselves and was punishing them for protesting against unfair taxes and policies. The Coercive Acts were met with widespread opposition in the colonies, and many people began to see the need for independence from Britain. The Coercive Acts were one of the key events that led to the American Revolution. They showed the colonists that they could not rely on British authority to protect their rights and freedoms, and that they needed to take action to secure their independence. The acts also galvanized support for the cause of independence among the colonists and helped to create a sense of unity and purpose among them. In this way, the Coercive Acts played a crucial role in the events leading up to America's freedom in 1776. 5. The First Continental Congress of 1774. The First Continental Congress of 1774 is a significant event in the road to independence for America. This Congress was a gathering of delegates from 12 of the 13 British colonies. The Congress was called in response to the Coercive Acts, which were a series of laws passed by the British Parliament that punished the colonists for the Boston Tea Party. The Coercive Acts were designed to quell the growing unrest in the colonies and tighten the British grip on the colonists. The First Continental Congress was held in Philadelphia from September 5 to October 26, 1774. The delegates who attended the Congress were tasked with finding a way to unite the colonies and respond to the Coercive Acts. The Congress produced a document called the Declaration of Rights and Grievances, which was a list of grievances against the British government and a call for action to address these grievances. The Congress also established the Continental Association, which was a unified boycott of British goods. The Continental Association was an important step towards economic independence for the colonies and demonstrated the power of the colonies when they acted together. The First Continental Congress was a significant event in the road to independence for America. It laid the groundwork for future Congresses and united the colonies in their fight for freedom. The Congress demonstrated the power of the colonies when they acted together and set the stage for the events that led to the American Revolution. 6. The Battle of Lexington and Concord in 1775. One of the critical events that paved the way to America's freedom was the Battle of Lexington and Concord in 1775. It was the first military engagement between British troops and American colonists, marking the start of the American Revolution. The British forces, led by Lieutenant Colonel Francis Smith, were on a mission to seize and destroy military supplies stored by the colonists in Concord. However, the colonists, led by famous patriots Paul Revere and Samuel Prescott, were warned of the British troops' arrival and were prepared to defend themselves. The night before the battle, Revere and Prescott rode through the countryside, alerting the colonial Minutemen of the British forces coming. This gave the colonists ample time to prepare themselves for confrontation. The next day, on April 19, 1775, the British troops arrived in Lexington, where they encountered a group of colonial militiamen. The British commander ordered the militiamen to disperse, but they refused, and shots were fired. The exact sequence of events is still debated by historians, but what is clear is that the skirmish led to the deaths of 8 colonists and 1 British soldier. The British troops then marched to Concord, where they found that most of the military supplies had already been moved. They set fire to a few buildings, but the colonists, who had gathered in force, were able to repel them. The British Army suffered significant casualties as it retreated to Boston, and the colonists had secured a victory in the First Battle of the Revolution. The Battle of Lexington and Concord was a significant moment in the events leading to America's freedom. It showed that the colonists were willing and able to fight for their independence, and it served as a rallying cry for other colonists to join the cause. The battle also marked the beginning of an 8-year war that would culminate in the signing of the Declaration of Independence in 1776. 7. The Second Continental Congress of 1775. The Second Continental Congress of 1775 marked a pivotal moment in American history. Just a year prior, the First Continental Congress had been held in response to the British Parliament's passing of the Coercive Acts, or Intolerable Acts, which punished Massachusetts for the Boston Tea Party. However, the First Continental Congress had been unable to come to any real conclusions or agreements with Britain, and fighting between the British and the colonial militia at Lexington and Concord had already begun by the time the Congress met. The Second Continental Congress was thus held in a much more fraught and desperate atmosphere. Delegates from all 13 colonies attended, and there was much debate about whether to continue fighting or to attempt to reconcile with Britain. However, when British troops attacked American forces at Bunker Hill, it became clear that reconciliation was unlikely. Congress then took the momentous step of appointing George Washington as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army, and authorized the printing of paper money to fund the war effort. The Second Continental Congress also produced several important documents, including the Olive Branch Petition, which was a final attempt at reconciliation with Britain, and the Declaration of the Causes and Necessity of Taking Up Arms, which outlined the reasons for the colony's armed resistance. These documents, along with the appointment of Washington and the authorization of funding, helped to solidify the colony's resolve to fight for their independence. 8. The Declaration of Independence of 1776. The Declaration of Independence of 1776 is one of the most significant documents in American history. It was the culmination of years of colonial unrest, and it marked the beginning of a new era for the United States of America. The Declaration was drafted by Thomas Jefferson, who was a member of the Continental Congress, and it was adopted on July 4, 1776, by the 13 colonies that had declared themselves independent from British rule. The Declaration proclaimed that all men are created equal and endowed with certain unalienable rights, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It also listed a series of grievances against the British government, including taxation without representation and the violation of colonial rights. The Declaration was a bold statement of independence that would inspire other nations to follow in America's footsteps. The signing of the Declaration of Independence was a momentous occasion that was celebrated with great fanfare. The document was read aloud in public for the first time on July 8, 1776, and it was greeted with cheers and applause. The signing itself took place over the course of several weeks, with most of the signers putting their names to the document on August 2, 1776. The Declaration of Independence of 1776 is an enduring symbol of America's fight for freedom and its commitment to the principles of democracy and equality. It remains one of the most important documents in American history, and its influence can be felt around the world. Today, Americans celebrate Independence Day on July 4 every year to commemorate the signing of the Declaration of Independence and the birth of the United States of America. 9. The Revolutionary War of 1776–1783. The Revolutionary War of 1776–1783 was a pivotal event in American history. It was the culmination of years of tension between the American colonists and the British government. The colonists were growing increasingly frustrated with the British government's attempts to control their lives and their economy. The British government, on the other hand, saw the colonists as subjects who needed to be controlled for the good of the empire. The war began on April 19, 1775, when British troops marched on the town of Lexington and Concord to seize a cache of weapons that the colonists had stored there. The colonists, alerted to the British plans, were waiting for them, and a skirmish broke out. This was the first battle of the Revolutionary War. The war continued for several years, with both sides suffering heavy losses. The British had a larger and better equipped army, but the colonists were fighting on their home turf, and they were highly motivated. The colonists also received help from other countries, most notably France, which sent troops and supplies to aid the cause. The turning point of the war came in 1781, when American forces, led by General George Washington, defeated the British Army at Yorktown. This victory convinced the British government that the war was unwinnable, and they began peace negotiations. Finally, on September 3, 1783, the Treaty of Paris was signed, officially ending the war. The treaty recognized the independence of the United States and established the boundaries of the new nation. The Revolutionary War was a long and difficult struggle, but it laid the foundation for the United States as we know it today. The courage and determination of the colonists, the leadership of General Washington, and the support of other countries all played a crucial role in securing America's freedom. 10. The legacy of the road to independence, the birth of America. The legacy of the road to independence is the birth of America, a nation that cherishes freedom and democracy. The events leading up to the Declaration of Independence and the subsequent Revolutionary War created a foundation for the principles and values that the United States stands for today. The birth of America was not just about breaking away from British rule, it was also about creating a new way of life. The Founding Fathers wanted to establish a country where people had the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They believed that individuals should be able to pursue their dreams and aspirations without fear of oppression or persecution. The Constitution and the Bill of Rights were created to protect these ideals and ensure that the government would never become tyrannical. The principles of freedom, democracy, and equality are still the guiding principles of American society today. The birth of America also had a profound impact on the world. The American Revolution inspired people around the world to fight for their own freedom and independence. It helped to ignite the flame of democracy that would eventually spread throughout the world. In conclusion, the legacy of the road to independence is the birth of America, a nation that continues to inspire people around the world to fight for their own freedom and democracy. The principles of freedom, democracy, and equality that were established during this time continue to shape American society and serve as a beacon of hope for people everywhere. We hope you enjoyed our video about the road to independence that led to America's freedom in 1776. This was a pivotal time in history, and understanding the events and circumstances that led to this momentous occasion is crucial to understanding the birth of the United States of America. By uncovering the events leading to America's freedom, we can gain a greater appreciation for the sacrifices made by our forefathers and the values that helped shape the nation we know today. Let us remember the spirit of the Founding Fathers and strive to continue their legacy.